Great, excellent. We'll go ahead and get this meeting started. We will start with the call to order and the roll call.
Kevin Alltucker,
Here.
Denise Diamond,
Here.
Mike Eister,
Here.
Austin Volnaghi,
Here,
Lisa Fragola,
Here.
Steve Mattel.
Here.
Zach Mulholland.
Here.
excellent. Everyone's here. Thank you so much. Next, we'll move on to land recognition and Colleen Varek. Colin Varek.
Good evening. I'd like to start our meeting with the acknowledgement that the land we are on is the traditional homelands of the Kalapuya people. The Kalapuya were stewards of this land for over 14,000 years before their traditional way of life was forever disrupted and destroyed. We start our meeting with humility and reverence for the original inhabitants, the Kalapuya. Thank you.
Thank you. Responses to information requests. Any questions or comments in regards to the information requests? Mike.
So I just had a comment about our land recognition. I thought we decided to take the destroyed out of there, so maybe we just need to queue up our.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and I unfortunately didn't have a chance to do that. Yeah, just for context, the NASA, the Native American Student Association asked for that word, the word destroyed to be removed because the Kalapuya are here. Their culture was definitely not only disrupted, but their people are not destroyed. They are here, and so we want to recognize that. And so in the future, we might just want to go ahead and remove that word. Thank you for that. Yeah.
I have a couple follow-up questions on the responses to information requests, but I'll do it during the board questions, comments at the end.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you. Any other comments, questions in regards to information requests? Seeing none, we'll move on. Sorry, I lost my place here. Moving on to agenda adoption. I will need a motion and a second for the adoption of the agenda.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Excellent. It's been moved and seconded. Let's just do a roll call vote to adopt the agenda. Oh, sorry. Any discussion from the maker of the motion?
No.
Oh, excellent. Great.
Kevin Alltucker,
Aye.
Denise Diamond,
Aye.
Mike Eister,
Aye.
Austin Volnaghi,
Aye.
Lisa Fragola,
Aye.
Steve Mattel.
Aye.
Zach Mulholland.
Aye.
Excellent. Perfect. Moving on to discussion items, program spotlight, the Rimrock Shelter, and Dr. Belcher.
Sure. I'd like to ask Dr. Tinkham to come up and introduce our faculty member, Professor Hauser.
Could we go ahead and the very first slide, please? So I'm absolutely delighted to introduce to you today Marge Elder. She asked for me to introduce.
My apologies. Can you maybe speak closer to the mic? I can't hear you here in the Zoom land.
Can you hear me now? Are you able to hear me? Is the mic on? Okay, if this mic is not on. So I'll just go ahead and introduce you from my seat and we'll figure that. Okay.
Thank you, Shelley. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no worries. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce to you tonight Marge Hauser. Marge Hauser is an anthropology instructor here at Lane Community College. Her specialty is paleoethnobotany. She maintains a research agenda through a relationship with the University of Oregon's excavation of the Rimrock Draw Rock Shelter. She oversees the field school there and has provided so many opportunity for Lane Community College students to participate in that dig site. I was looking at my transcripts over the weekend because I realized I had taken 5 anthropology courses as an undergraduate, and I would have loved to have been your student, Marge, and perhaps my trajectory would be much different. Maybe imagine that. So the Rimrock Rock Shelter is an incredibly important discovery. It's right here in Oregon, and it is the oldest known habitation site in North America. And Marge tonight is going to give you an overview of what they have found over I believe, the last 15 years. And she's also going to talk to you about the opportunities that our students have with that site.
Thank you, Shelley. Good evening, everyone. I think with that introduction, I'll just ask that we move on to the next slide. So here's a quick little overview of what I'm going to address, the significance of the site, my involvement, Lane Community College student involvement, and the University of Oregon, the collaborations with the U of O, but not just the U of O, with the Museum of Natural and Cultural History and with the Bureau of Land Management, because really it was the Bureau of Land Management that funded most of my research. And before we go to the next slide, I want to make a quick comment about my decision to come to Lane 20 years ago. When I was leaving my research position at the U of O to take this teaching job, I was called into the provost's office and I was told I was making a big mistake, that you should never go from a university to a community college. But the reality for me was different. I really loved teaching, and I thought that I could do both. I could teach full-time at Lane and still dabble in some research in the summers, perhaps small scale, but still. So not long after settling into teaching at Lane, I was recruited by Scott Thomas, who's the BLM archaeologist at the BLM. And he wanted me to work on the site, Rimrock Draw Rock Shelter, because he needed a paleoethnobotanist. And I, thought about where the site was located, 5 hours to the east, and thought it's a big project. Maybe not. Maybe I don't want to live in a tent anymore for the entire summer. And he called me back a week later and said, what if I get you a mouse-free trailer? Would that work? And I don't know, Scott, I mean, there's rattlesnakes out there. He said, look, you have to do this. You have to do it because I read your dissertation and I wrote you into the federal grant. And I'm thinking, really? You read the dissertation? I mean, that no card chases, no 4th and 1. So I figured that anybody that will do that deserves my respect. And so I joined the team and we got to work. And as the holes got deeper out at the site and as the dates got older, I got a call one Sunday afternoon from the National Geographic asking me to participate in a documentary, doing an interview for them. And they didn't want to go to anyone at Oregon State or the U of O because the BLM told them that the two people that they really needed to talk to were actually instructors right here at Lane Community College. Next. So this is my 5 minutes of fame. My husband thinks, tried to convince me that I should put it on a postcard and send it to the old provost. Yes. But really, these are the key players. Scott Thomas on the left, this is the guy that promised me the mouse-free trailer, which didn't turn out to be mouse-free at all, by the way. And Patrick O'Grady, he's the primary investigator at the site. He's also a part-time instructor at Lane. Next. So here's a shot of the site and the lay of the land. This is essentially right outside of Riley, Oregon, 30 miles west of Burns. And I want you to imagine for a moment, as you look at this landscape, what it would have looked like 10,000 years ago. With the basin filled with shallow lakes and stream beds flowing into those lakes, because that's what Scott Thomas did in 2009. He climbed up on this very hillside and looked out at this picture and he imagined the lakes and the reeds growing and the willow and the ducks and the geese. And he could see the dry stream beds that would have filled those lakes. And he asked himself a question. If I was here 10,000 years ago, where would I build my house? And for Scott, it was where the stream and the lake met. And so he strapped on his backpack, hiked a mile or so across the sagebrush, and looked around on the ground. And this is what he saw. Next. These are stem points that range the dates about 7,500 to maybe 15,000 years ago. Next. And so we set up a field school. University of Oregon sponsored this field school with the help of the BLM. In 2012 was our first year in the field with students. So this is just a shot of us. You can see the rim rock there, just getting started with the excavation. And it didn't take us long to start finding tools under the surface as well. Next. This is my crew. We were working out of a converted horse trailer. And I was honored that first year to have 2 members of the Grand Ronde Tribal Council on my crew. Next. And what we were doing is collecting soil from ancient fire hearths from the site. And taking those into our little field trailer and our field lab, and using microscopes to identify the charred seeds and charcoal from the site. And so what you're looking at here is a bulrush seed, a seed from another plant called wapato, which is sometimes called Indian potato, and some charcoal from a willow. And none of these plants grow there now. So the significance of this work is that we can look at these seeds and the charcoal, and it can give us clues into what people were eating in the past, what the climate was like back then, and we can also get dates and from these organics. So it's kind of like, looking at the menu, watching the weather report, and checking the calendar. This slide just shows you how deep the site actually got. I mean, we're talking 10 or 12 feet deep at locations, and that's pretty rare in over in the desert, because a lot of the sites I've worked on prior, we get down 2 feet, we're hitting bedrock. So this is really was really significant. Next. This is the real crux of the site. This slide, we're finding tools like these stem points here on the left, in association and very near volcanic ash, but volcanic ash associated with Mount St. Helens when it blew up almost 16,000 years ago. And on the right there on the top, we're finding tooth enamel. That's a piece of tooth enamel from a giant camel that used to wander around North America. That we got a date from that particular fragment, came out to 18,600 years ago. We've had other fragments of tooth enamel as well. There's about 20 or more. And a lot of the dates are coming out right in that range between 17,000 and the 18,600. The tool right underneath that on the slide, but it's also underneath it in the actual excavation, is a scraper tool that we have found blood residue from ancient bison. So all of this together, we've been able to corroborate at the site in a couple of different areas. And so it's not just a one individual date. And we feel confident that this site is virtually the oldest human habitation site in North America. We're real excited about that. There are some human footprints down in the Southwest that are older, but in terms of a habitation site, this is the oldest. And so it's exciting. And it's going to get a lot more attention as we do the final publications. And then next, and this is my last slide, and it's the thing that I'm even more excited about and proud of, and that's the student involvement in this site. And this is just a sample. We have Molly Kirkpatrick on the right, I'm sorry. She was a student of mine at Lane. She took her first archaeology class from me. And even from the beginning of the course, she was asking me, can you even get a job doing this? Because I'm excited. And I encouraged her, and she went to field school and she became a supervisor for Pat. She worked out at Rimrock. She went on to get her master's degree, and she's now a professional archaeologist for the state parks. Amy Nelson on the bottom left, very similar story. Took archaeology here, went on to the U of O, worked with Patrick at Rimrock, became a supervisor, got hired at the museum for a few years. Another success story. Gabe Sanchez in the bottom center there. One of my favorite stories. Awesome student at Lane, went on to get a PhD at Berkeley, came back to Eugene, is now a professor of anthropology in the Department of Anthropology at the U of O. And I'm just thrilled to have him around and a support system for our students and the Shinnecock program. And then finally, on the bottom right is Jamie Dexter Kennedy, who I mentored as an undergrad. And she also went on to get a PhD. I taught her how to be a paleoethnobotanist. And she is now not only one of my best friends, but the director of archaeological research at the Museum of Natural and Cultural History. I'm excited about this and I'm proud of this because it just underscores the relationships we've been able to build between Lane, the U of O, the museum, and our students. And that's so important now, perhaps more than ever before, because of the passage of the infrastructure bill. The law requires, federal law requires that archaeologists are participating in these projects whenever there's a new bridge, a highway is getting expanded. We need archaeologists in the field, and it's just really exciting to be able to tell our students that we can get them started here, we can get them connected with the right people and the right programs, and they can make a living wage. Yeah, so thank you. And are there questions?
Absolutely. Mike?
Yeah. Congratulations and thank you for such an inspiring story.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I was really excited about this presentation, and there's multiple reasons why. But I was really happy to hear in your presentation collaboration with local tribes. And I really want to emphasize your point, and maybe even the point that your student even asked, is there even jobs in this? And quite frankly, there is a workforce need for this, like seriously, and most recently with the infrastructure bill. But I would say that in general, for the education and understanding of our past, both on a climate level, sociology level, even just like just understanding our past as a state in general with the land and everything. There is a huge need for this, and I'm really excited that our institution and with your dedication and hard work is a part of this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with all of that.
Any other questions or comments?
I just say what he said, so.
Okay, well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you once again. All right, moving on to bond project prioritization.
Yes, we'll ask Jennifer Hayward to come up and introduce this topic with Tom Goodhue.
Can we get that mic working? No, okay.
Hi. Okay. You all know Tom, so you don't need an introduction. But he's going to give a quick presentation, and I know you'll have lots of questions. So I'm going to sit up here take Shelley's spot to help out with that when he's done.
All right. Can everybody hear me? Just making sure. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to try and do a real quick run through of the slide deck and then we'll open it up to the conversation. So if I can go to the next slide here. This first slide is really provided as a background. We developed this with the administration back in 2020 as I first started here. These principles were issued to the board as well as the Bond Oversight Committee in April 2021. They're not really prescriptive saying thou shalt do this, but really developed as a guide for decisions. Next slide, please. This is bond implementation principles, and this one goes back even further. This came out of the master planning principles that were done for the bond or for the 2020 master plan that the bond was based off of. These go back to May 2017. That was a pretty broad-based effort with the campus as they started up the master plan. So next slide.
Oh, and Tom, really quick, would you like to wait for questions till the end or?
If I can, I'll run through it and
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll have a couple.
Totally. Excellent. Thank you so much.
This slide starts to get a little busier. The bond planning period started in 2020. We planned out to 2028, an 8-year plan, basically. When I came in, we started with about 30 different financial sub-fund accounts. We're now up to about 50 of them that we look at. Typically about 12 to 15 of our active, about 12 of them have been either retired or completed. The intent of this slide is really to start to look at, we're working on organizing for a webpage and communication with our public relations group to try and put together this realm of a range of projects that we have, 30 plus projects and things. So it's a start. We'll talk about this a little bit more. One thing I do want to point out is the category of administrative. It is not really a standalone project, but it is an ongoing project that we'll talk more about. Next slide, please. This is perhaps a little simpler way to look at it of kind of the first request when I was asked here is, gee, what do you got done, Tom? So this is projects that we really have completed. Certainly projects that are in process. You probably recognize most of these. And then there's a series of kind of big picture of things that are in the early planning stages, are kind of allocated for funding and working on that. Again, when you see in process the administrative and financial oversight, you're familiar, this is part of that. One thing I wanted to mention, that includes the Bond Oversight Committee that is here. Looking at our records, the bond itself has worked with over 125 different vendors that we've written checks to. That doesn't include all of the vendors that our major subcontractors work with. We do 50 to 75 invoices per month. Again, that doesn't include all the subcontracts that are in there. And running somewhere between $2 and $5 million a month on the bond is our cash flow. Next slide. This starts to look at our expense and encumbrance. I mentioned that this was an 8-year plan. We're roughly at the midpoint of it. We're at a point where we have a third of it that's actually spent out, a third of it that's encumbered, and a third that we've allocated for upcoming projects. So we're kind of at that magic point. When I first started laying things out, I kind of dreamed that we might be at this spot. So it's really encouraging to me as I look at these things. The second thing that I want to point out in the lower one, planning and administration expenses. We're currently projecting only 4% of the bond, which is an amazingly low value. The other thing I want to say is that the public approved 121.5 million. We're currently working with a plan for 157 million plus or minus. That's almost a 30% increase above that. So that's a pretty amazing thing from the team that's here. Next slide. These last three slides, I'm not going to go into details, but I know many of the board are deeply interested in these community benefits. If you can go, this one is for Florence. As we're completing it, it's more or less the final. Next slide. Health professions, community benefits, slightly different format. We have a different contractor, so they work a little differently. Next slide. And this is where we're at with ITAC. So each of these are at a little different format. And with that, now you guys get to ask questions.
Excellent. Questions from the board? Zach?
The update that we got back in July said there was approximately 5.5 million left in unallocated funds. And then the slides here show approximately 1.7 million in unallocated funds. Can you just tell us how the plan has changed or what we've spent from then till now that's changed those numbers?
So basically what Tom meant by that is he has projects penciled in and he and I are going to submit our proposed projects to Stephanie and then she's going to review those with cabinet and give them to the board. But it really actually hasn't changed. Does that make sense? And Stephanie can explain it in more detail if necessary.
Well, Tom, I think maybe I'd need your help on this.
Okay.
So what did you do?
What I do, I look at this a couple of times a month and part of it is projections where we're going as I look at these non-allocated or those funds, projects that we haven't got to as we continue on, even the projects that are underway. As I get new projections in, there are, in case you haven't noticed, construction costs tend to continue to escalate. I think our facilities are a little more broke than we thought at the start. So as we dig in, get into this, the projections tend to go a little higher. So always a continuing discussion on those funds that are laid out, but not necessarily under contract. That is the discussion that Jennifer and Dr. Bulger and I are continuing to work on, but our projections are showing it's a little bit tighter than we had hoped back, in July, which is, 7 months ago now. So
Thank you, Tom. So to summarize, not at this meeting, you can see that we did not give a list of projects that were prioritized at this meeting, but that will be coming at a future meeting. So I will be looking at the projects that have gone through a prioritization that will go to the cabinet as well. And then before it comes to the board, but we will be doing that in the future.
Do you have a follow-up question?
I can go after Lisa if she's got a question.
All right, perfect. Lisa? Oh, you're muted, Lisa.
I was curious about the exact same question that Zach asked about the difference in the, from July, 5.5 million, and now it's like 1 point something million. And so when you said that a third of the money so you said we're at about a third, and that a third is allocated for upcoming projects. So can you relate that to where in the chart that would be, the in process or the proposed? So like when you're describing a third allocated for upcoming projects, are those the proposed or are they the in process?
those would be ones in the proposed section on page 5. So that list is,
Yep, I see it. I can see it because I have it on my other computer.
And I'll just follow up. The other aspect is that while we have things encumbered, there are also bits and pieces of these projects, like even for things now, we're still contracting for furniture for health professions, things like that, as we refine some of those things. So it starts to tie up a little bit more funds in that as we deal with it.
So wouldn't a third for upcoming projects be more than the 1 point something million?
That is on this slide here, it is the remaining project allocations of $50 million.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand. So the $50 million is for the proposed projects on slide 5. And then that leaves non-allocated funds of 1.7 for other projects beyond the proposed ones.
Yeah, that would be true, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I think Tom will agree with me if I give this clarification, which is that the $50 million does also include some of the in-process projects, like particularly math and science. I think there's about maybe $20 million with that project that's not encumbered yet. For example, and public safety relocation is another one is another fairly largish one that's not encumbered yet. So those are a couple of them that we're still considering in process because science, we have the design team hired, the design is well underway. So that's in process, but the vast majority of that money hasn't yet been encumbered.
The 50 million.
Yeah, thank you. That,
Thank you for the clarification.
Excellent. We got 3 minutes left in this conversation. Zach?
So just to say, I would like a little more detailed response with regards to the difference in the 4 million between then and now, in terms of what's been allocated between then and now. Can you remind everyone which items were specifically named in the voters pamphlet as items that were likely to be funded by the measure if approved?
try that one.
Well, Zach, you submitted this with your questions in advance, right?
Yeah.
And
So if you could just
So,
state that. for
definitely,
the
yeah.
board- for everyone.
So of the two projects that I listed in the information request that are still in the proposed category that aren't underway yet are the cybersecurity lab and the mobile CTE lab.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to state I'm very, very concerned that we are not going to fund the cybersecurity lab, and more important to me is the mobile CTE training facility for rural areas in our county. I very much want to see at least that funded prior to us going out for another bond. And so I will be having a motion in 2 weeks around prioritizing remaining bond funds to ensure we're completing projects from the voters pamphlet. And I'll ask Austin to include that motion in the packet for our next meeting.
And Zach and I had a conversation prior to this meeting, and I will bring that conversation to the president and vice chair during our agenda setting meetings. So Denise.
I absolutely concur with Zach. I know that in particular, the Florence area has been participating and looking forward to this mobile CTE lab. And additionally, it would seem that getting some kind of estimate on the costs for the proposed, just a range. I know it can't be tied down exactly, but for us to be able to see estimates, I think helps to understand where the funding is going and how much might be left. I understand that costs are increasing. Again, just a general estimate, I think, is helpful in this documentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa?
Yep. So I also wanted to reference another project that is literally in if you look at the actual statement from the voters pamphlet, it says, if approved, this measure is expected to include the following projects. And that was provided in the July packet when the last time we had this conversation. And one of them says, create workforce development center. And so I was just wondering, is the workforce development center, is that going to be part of the iTech building?
My understanding is yes.
Yeah, I think that's the intent. I looked back for Grant Matthews, but that is the current intent.
Okay, great. That's what I thought. Thank you very much. So I would just add that I too want to make sure that we are fulfilling our, commitment to the voters and following through on those projects that we committed to. And it would be really helpful for us to have an understanding of that money situation, like that third, what's available, what's allocated, what's not allocated. And I'm supportive of the board providing guidance on this. Thank you for the report. It was really helpful.
Yes, once again, thank you for the report and the very timely presentation of that report. Thank you. All right, we are out of time under this topic. Thank you once again for the presentation. We are now going to discuss the FY25 budget development update. Dr. Bolger.
Yes, thank you so much. John Nisbet is on Zoom here, and he is going to give an update on the FY25 budget. John?
All right, yes, thank you. If we could have the slide deck. Essentially what the goal of this is to basically share where we are in the 25 development process so far, being that it's February, we still have some time left on this. However, wanted to review a few key factors just to make sure that you're up to date. Next slide. So we're going to talk over a little bit to socialize where we are on a tuition recommendation, because we're at that point in the process and calendar where we're going to want to move pretty quickly to bring a recommendation formally for an action item at the March meeting, first March meeting. Also want to give you an update. The audit is moments away from completion. Team's done a great job in working with our auditors at Coons. So give you a 23 audited ending fund balance and review a projected 24 ending fund balance, being that we're 7 periods into the year. And then take a look at some revenue and expense parameters. And of course, our framework that we reviewed in December does include scenarios that we can provide, and looking at long range planning. So we can take a look at various things from 25 through 28 within that framework. So next slide. Through a lot of investigation, evaluation of other institutions, and consultation within the college, where we're settling is a 3% increase on resident and non-resident tuition and online. I brought together a large group of stakeholders across the college to talk about not only tuition, but where fees are. We know that the international student tuition rates are locked for the second year of 3 per the board last year, and had previously communicated that the preliminary higher education price index currently, and still preliminary as their analysis is going to be completed, is 4% for last year. So we know that costs specific to higher education increased by 4% last year, essentially what that means. We know that based on preliminary indications for other community colleges within the state, that a range of 2.5% to 4% won't change our standing or our rank in how we're compared with other community colleges in the state of Oregon. And of course, all of that needs to be finalized, but we're starting to move toward what we think is the best fit for LCC. Talking to fees, we did a very comprehensive review, brought together lots of folks, as I mentioned, took a look at technology and transportation fees, which are projected to remain unchanged. There is a group with student affairs that has been looking at options toward how to better finance the student health center. It's a great thing that we have that on campus. That's a differentiator compared to other institutions. What could we do perhaps to look at a better financial model to reduce the subsidy from the college? So that's still in discussion. Student group fees, their organizations are reviewed and approved by the student government. And then any other course and differential fees, which we have a large schedule of, those are guided by their respective divisions and the deans, so they don't require board approval. But the 3% is essentially what we would come back with in March 6th for any further discussion, but want to be able to approve that so we can stay on track with the budget calendar. Next slide.
And John, would you be willing to accept questions during the presentation, or do you want to wait till after?
Let's actually wait till after. There's just a handful of slides here, and that tells the whole story before we get to the end.
Okay. Lisa?
I'd like to be able to ask questions as we go through. It's really hard for me to process all the information and wait. It's just really helpful to my brain if we can ask questions as we go through.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you. So this 3% increase of tuition, what was the Budget Development Subcommittee involved in this recommendation when you talked about the different groups that you were in collaboration with?
So we've talked about that within the subcommittee. We still have to form, because it's February, because the work is continuing, we still have to come back and talk about a whole framework. So this is one of those attributes. So when we come back with a final budget group of scenarios, there'll probably be other scenarios. The recommendation that we have is 3%. But so it's an ongoing discussion.
Okay, and I have one more question. My understanding was that the task force last spring for the Student Health Center recommended an increase in fees, and I'm wondering if you could remind me what that increase was?
No, I think unless Colin or others in the room.
Dr. Joe?
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, if I could add, we just held 3 more meetings with the healthcare task force, and as the last one was on Thursday evening last week, and the task force has put together a group of about 4 or so recommendations that they're going to bring forward. And so each one has a different impact on student fees or the support from the general fund. So we're going to bring those to the board, I think, soon as one of our next steps. The cabinet hasn't reviewed it. Institutional research just gathered all the data. We put a survey together to gain information, and those recommendations came of that. And so we'll be able to share those shortly. And each one, as I said, has a different impact on student fees and the budget.
Okay, thank you.
All right. You move on to the next slide.
Yep. I have to back up there, I think.
Yeah, that's the next slide. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go with it.
Yep.
So the 25 projected revenue parameter, the things that we've discussed previously as attributes that influence the 1/3, a third, a third. When you break down the total college's revenues, so a third of that is the state funding. This will be the second year of the biennium, so that's projected to be flat. What makes up enrollment or tuition revenue, of course, is the tuition increase and projected enrollment increases. So at 3% and 5% that we've discussed, and then property taxes, which historically we've looked at for a number of years, at 3.2%. And then other revenue components, much smaller, are student fees, admin recovery, other revenue, and sales of goods and services. So overall, when we take all of those components together, we look at a projected revenue growth at this point at 2.9 million.
All right, Lisa, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm wondering about the ERTC one-time funds. You included those in the projected revenue growth at the last meeting.
Yep. Still the same.
So how much was it?
That is 1.355 million.
And is that included in this amount?
In this particular amount, no. So that's a one-time amount. The budget revenues of what we're looking at with the major components here across just state funding, property taxes, tuition, as I mentioned, all these other components, the student fees is 4 million, admin recovery is about $1 million, those kinds of things. This is 1.4 for the ERTC.
Okay, thanks.
This is a line item of all revenues, kind of a board level summary.
Perfect. Go on to the next slide then.
Okay, so as we get toward taking a look at expense parameters, we've talked about a number of these things previously, and What we know now, based on, some news of the last couple weeks, we know that the faculty contract will be continuing to this next year. So we've included the COLA that has been released, as well as step increases for eligible faculty. The classified staff negotiations continue, but we have budgeted, or at least projected to budget, 4% for classified staff and 4% for management. The position vacancies that we've spoken of as well at 1.6 million that were held this year as part of the budget rebalancing package, we intend to fill all or nearly all of those positions. So we've tried to do that because many of them were really important essential positions, and we re-reviewed those with the cabinet. So we're trying to include all of those in the projected budget. And then we've added a 3% increase for all materials and supply. So then, as we spoke previously as well, we wanted to make sure that we're investing in the things that are most essential for the college. So we've talked about deferred maintenance quite a bit. Previously, we had shared that at 750. To get to a balanced budget, that's been reduced to 550. Need to invest in enrollment, Motomatic and other initiatives that we need to ensure that we can achieve 5% growth. So we'd like to add 200,000 there. Lane Forward, 50,000 there, and I think Shane has more to talk about that on. That takes us from 250 to 300,000 to invest in that program, and 550 as well for IT investments. So we've talked quite a bit about things that were peeled back during that period of COVID, and deferred maintenance is one of those. Our IT infrastructure is another that altogether we find would be an essential investment into next year. We also talked a bit about spreading the Fund 9 deficit recovery. So rather than doing it all in 1 year or 2 years, we've maximized that to really flatten that across the next 3 years. So 24 to 26, we'd spread that at 1.6 million. That takes care of the rate of expenses that we have each of the next 3 years, as well as a payback. So we've spread that over the 3. And then when we talk about the reserve for revenue shortfall, given a 5% enrollment increase into this next year, want to be conservative and cautious about covering that. So we've reduced it from 3.8 million currently to 1.3. So when we take all those components into account, we've projected expense growth at about 3.1 million.
Excellent. Denise, then Lisa, then Zach. Denise?
How many positions are you are projected there in that line item?
Which one? The position vacancies?
Yes.
It's about a dozen.
Do you have a follow-up, Denise?
We would see a list of those, or?
We can. Some of those positions initially, so there was an original list of vacancies that had been pulled back, and some funds were used to repurpose and to fill them because they were essential roles. So that's changed over a period of time. But the current list is, like I said, about a dozen positions, I think 11. And of those positions, we can share.
Thank you.
I would also add that those positions are under discussion. It's actually not a final list. Those positions were from last year, I believe they were. And so those were specific positions, but they really are under discussion and may be changed given based on what we believe that the institution needs at this time.
Excellent. Lisa?
Yeah, I was wondering about the reserve for revenue shortfall and why it is listed here as an expense. We have this money in a reserve, which is kind of like a savings account.
Yeah.
So, and we had 3.8 million in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we may need to use some of that to cover the ERTC if it doesn't come in during this fiscal year. But don't we have enough to roll over 1.3 million, which would mean that it is not an expense, it's just maintaining the reserve?
Essentially, so we didn't have another slide as we did last time for all the contingency and reserves. So I summarized those in the last meeting. This was one particular aspect that would be changed. So it didn't fall into expense or revenue, but I wanted to note it so that you're aware.
So was my understanding correct? Like we have this savings account and we can just roll 1.3 million of it over?
So this is, yes, so essentially we would retain, rather than keeping 3.8 million as a reserve this year, we would reduce that reserve and only have 1.3 in FY25. So that reserve would essentially cover us for any enrollment shortfall. But would
Great.
not cover us for the ERTC. And that, like I said, it could come in at the end of this fiscal year magically, or it could more likely come in FY25.
So if it comes in FY25, then we need to cover it in FY24 out of the reserve.
Yes, so the 3.8 this year does cover that. So we are covered for it, not receiving this year.
And how much is that out of the 3.8?
2 million. Because initially
2
the
million.
ERTC was thought to be 2 million, and it had then later revised down.
Okay, so 2 million and 1.3 is 3.3. So what about the other 0.5 million?
Essentially, it's just a story that's changed over a period of time. So at the beginning of the budget year, you may remember it was 4 million. And then 200,000 was pulled out because that was needed in the unappropriated ending fund balance. Then it was changed again, well, it was 3.8 million. So now we've retained that throughout this fiscal year from not only covering the ERTC, but also enrollment shortfall, which hasn't occurred, we've grown. So both of those things now we're looking at to project what do we need in FY25. That's where we come up with 1.3.
Okay, I guess I'm just seeing that we should, even after we cover the 1.3 and the ERTC in this fiscal year, we should still have additional money from the 3.8. And so
Yeah, correct.
that would be a board decision to decide where to put it, correct?
Well, essentially, it's funding that would roll to the ending fund balance at the end of the year, which is included in our 24 projection.
Okay, thank you for all that clarification.
Sure.
Excellent. Next slide.
I had a question.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Go ahead.
So at the end here, reduce reserve for revenue shortfall to 1.3 million from 3.8 million. If we did not include that on this slide, would the projected expense growth actually be $2.5 million higher?
No.
All right.
Okay, the math seems a little weird, but okay. Because these things seem to add up to more than $3 million.
Total expense growth when we take all things into account is 3.1. Some expenses are reduced. So we have a framework with dozens and dozens of lines. So we're trying to simplify it for messaging purposes rather than walk through the whole spreadsheet.
Okay, so the fact that this adds up to more than 3.1 million, there's some other minus somewhere else that brings it down to 3.1.
Essentially, yes. So the total projected expense growth is 3.1 million.
Thank you.
Okay. Next slide.
So now if we consider ending fund balance. So after much of the audit process now, the 23 ending fund balance for this past year changed many times. So we've communicated that along the process, but it hasn't been official, called it preliminary many times, but I can stop doing that now. It's actually 7.4 million as of the end of 23. So that is an 8.8% based on what we need for the 10%. So we fell short this past year. And so now we move into 24. That was the beginning fund balance, 7.4. Projected revenues are on the order of 93.5 million. Expenditures for this year, 91.7. So we performed well. We had the lots of the budget rebalancing this year, been difficult in that sense. Enrollment and tuition revenues are up. State funding, as you remember, came in much richer than we anticipated for this year, about 1.3 million. So the change in fund balance for this year is anticipated to be 1.7 million. So we would have a surplus that then adds to the ending or the beginning and last year's ending fund balance. So we would achieve about 9.1 million, which is dead on 10%. So we would expect to be in good shape at the end of FY24.
All right. Next slide.
Then as we move toward, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, Steve, go ahead.
Sue, could you go back to the last slide? This is a very small point, just mostly for my understanding. I see that in some years, the ending fund balance rolls over and is the beginning fund balance of the following year precisely the same. And then in some years, it's not exactly the same. And again, this is just for my understanding. What accounts for that?
Just a rounding issue. So when we rounded these, not to get too busy in the slide, we'll take a look at it. It might be $1 off or something in the change of that, but we'll take a look at it. Thanks.
All right.
Okay, so as we pivot to FY25 and what our projections are, so we've taken a lot of these attributes on the revenue side, and we anticipate growth to 96.2 million. And on the expense side of things, moving up quite a bit to 95.9, so about 96 as well. So we have one scenario preliminarily that says, hey, we've got a balanced budget moving into the next fiscal year. So about a $300,000 surplus, roughly balanced, being able to maintain that 10%. Our goal within looking at projected 24 and a 25 set of scenarios and attributes was to achieve and maintain 10%, at least for this year and moving into next year. Beyond that, it becomes a little less certain on what those attributes mean and what state funding will mean. A lot of big drivers to that, classified negotiations ongoing and things like that. So that's where we get into some more information in the next slide. But wanted to give you a sense that we have one scenario that gets us here. Now, important to note, we reviewed this today with the Budget Development Subcommittee. And that committee, subcommittee needs to do a little bit more work. As I mentioned, we want to be able to go through this, collect more feedback. We need to discuss it more with the cabinet, want to discuss it more with the subcommittee. And if they, recommend making different attributes to both expenses and revenues, that's great. So we still have some work to do on it. So I think what that will include is this would be one scenario, and then down the line in the budget calendar, when we come back to you for more of a mature budget conversation for what FY25 looks like, there'll be another couple scenarios that you've asked for.
Thank you. Next slide.
All right. So as we look in that framework of the long range planning, so we have a preliminary year-end surplus deficit and the unappropriated ending fund balance. Look at what it means. So you see 23, we came up a little short on the blue line. We've got 24 and 25 that could, 24 we do project, meeting a 10% ending fund balance this year. Don't have any real concerns over that. The only driver of that could be the classified negotiations. So that affects 24 and 25. And between those 2 years, staff costs had gone up about $2.25 million. So it's about 15.5% between 23 and 25. So as those negotiations continue, that may change 24 and 25, and of course the future as well. So we just want to be mindful of that. We've included what we think is 24, but like I said, that conversation is ongoing. So, but then as we look to the future, 26, 27, and 28 doesn't have a little label on there, but the 3 years at those out years, if we continue 4%, for example, at compensation increases, growth of expenses, even at 3% tuition increases for all years, 5% for enrollment, we might anticipate shrinking on the ending fund balance. Now, the one big driver there could be state funding. So we're being very conservative in that. We've only included for the next biennium's budget to grow by 3%. Historically, the last two have been 9 and 13. So if we're fortunate enough to come up with that, and if we receive another $1 million, that, for example, that could help moving into the next biennium. But that's so uncertain that we're not really sure. So each of those years would have to be handled a little bit differently. But it does show that more work's needed is essentially the take-home message on that. 26 to 28, each year needs to be managed individually to come up with that balanced budget. Does that make sense? Okay. So, questions? What are your thoughts here?
Excellent. Before we go into questions, is it okay if we add 5 minutes? We saved 7 minutes on the program spotlight. If we can add 5 minutes to this topic, excellent. Great. Let's see. I saw Lisa's hand up. Was there anybody else's? Yep. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hey, I put it down really quick too, because I have asked a couple of questions already, but if no one else has their hand up, I just wanted to ask about the IT investments, if we could go back to that slide. And this hasn't been something that we've seen before in the parameters.
Yeah.
And the expenses.
Mhm.
Yeah, there we go. So it says IT investments, and this is true also of deferred maintenance,
Mhm.
plus 550K from $0 and IT investments plus 550K from $0. So previous budget, I thought we had a budget for a deferred maintenance.
We did in the past. Some of that was carved out during that period of time with COVID. A lot of expenses had been removed. And typically, you're right, you would see a lot of these things simply rolled into expenses or material and supplies or outsourced services, things like that, where you don't see them itemized like this. The reason we've called them out specifically is because they're more strategic in nature. Deferred maintenance and IT investments are really essential for the college to invest in. Really, it's one of those things of pay me now or pay me later. The expenses continue to grow. Switches and servers and network infrastructure and things like that are aging. And so this really specifically calls out 550 toward IT, toward those of it. And of course, there's an IT operating budget in place today. But what this would do is specifically invest in big capital projects to be able to fix those things. And that would be ongoing in the out years as well. Same with deferred maintenance.
So we have an operating budget for IT investments, and this would add another 550K. I thought we also had an operating budget for deferred maintenance that
So
we
we
would
have
be adding an
facilities.
additional amount to.
Yeah, there are operating budgets that cover people and the basic supplies, right? So there's continuing operation of the college, so facilities and grounds and those kinds of things currently exist. But what this is a lot of the deferred major projects that have not been addressed on campus, IT investments like the network infrastructure, switches and servers, those things haven't been replaced, they've been aged. Another aspect is hardware. So Windows 10 is sunsetting, it's not supported anymore. 2/3 of the machines on campus run that. So there's some hardware replacements that have been pulled out from expenses. So IT budget includes the people and the basics, kind of bare bones to do the work, but this would include an investment to really fix the major items.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Excellent. We'll do Kevin and then Steve.
Yeah, thanks, John, for your presentation. I appreciate it, keeping us informed and updated as best you can, with the changing financial contours. I've got 2 questions. One of them is probably easily answered, and another one, I just want to make a placeholder. I don't want you to try to answer it tonight, just in light of time, but I'd be interested in some updates at the next meeting, perhaps. So the first question is, when the audit is, finished and done, completed, will there be a management letter produced?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Kuhn has customarily not provided that for us. It's a question that's to be determined. We've discussed it quite a bit internally, and we would like to see that.
Yeah, I would support that as a board member. The second question, just to kind of keep in the back of your head, is I had it in my mind, and I could be wrong, but, maybe during the summer, I had in my mind that as the debt service to the bond decreased in fiscal years 26, 27, 28, that our ending fund balances began to grow. And the information you showed us tonight showed something different. So I'm curious about if something has changed, if I misunderstood something. And again, I don't expect an answer tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, but thank you.
Excellent. Steve?
Well, thanks. I'll piggyback on Kevin's comment about the management letter. I wasn't going to comment on that, but I do support that. When I was over at eWeb, we did see an annual management letter at the board level. And frankly, sometimes it had some, revealing and even, ouch, embarrassing kinds of things. But that's the kind of, it's that kind of information that helps us improve. And we've had some issues that are that they would potentially catch. So I do support that, despite the, discomfort that it may cause. I also mostly wanted to commend you. I can see that on the summary slide that you showed, I think it was slide 5 just a moment ago. I can see some of the feedback from the board last time we met and discussed that's already been incorporated. So thanks for listening. And then finally, I also wanted to commend you for providing us these multi-year outlooks. I've been only here 3 cycles of budget reviews, and this is by far the most kind of forward-looking, right? Where we can see not just the year ahead of us, but we can see 2, 3, 4 years out, and the decisions we make now, what their implications might be for that. So I just think the process has improved, significantly under Sue's leadership and now yours, John, and I wanted to appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
Excellent. Now we got Zach.
Yeah. In terms of deferred maintenance, my recollection is that we have about $80 million right now, and that with current funding levels, that's increasing at about $3 million per year. Is that generally accurate? Okay. So in some ways, this is actually a deficit budget because our debts are growing $3 million a year that we're not funding, and we're passing that debt on to future students. And so anyways, I just like to say, actually very good work. I'm generally supportive of everything that is in the package. And I'm hopeful that some of the revenue projections are a little bit overly pessimistic, and that we'll have some additional dollars that we can dedicate to accelerating our Fund 9 repayment, and then dedicate all those funds to getting to the point we're not increasing our deferred maintenance budget, our backlog anymore. Thank you.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you.
Lisa, and then I'll spend 30 seconds saying something. Go ahead.
I know we're gonna make a decision on the tuition at the next meeting, but just as feedback, John, I wanted to say, based on the information that you provided, that the HEPI preliminary HEPI's at 4%, and that an increase of 2.5 to 4% won't change our standing against other community colleges. I'd like to see us, rather than approve something fixed as a parameter, to approve a range so that we can give the budget development subcommittee and your team some flexibility, and so that we can see a variety of scenarios. So I'm more interested in seeing a tuition range that we set as a parameter rather than one fixed amount.
Okay. What sounds right to you? What kind of a range?
Well, I mean, pretty much what you've defined in the past and what you have defined here, like 3 to 4%.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Really quick, thank you for this presentation. It's greatly appreciated. Let me just say 2 things. First off, I really value the opinion of our budget development subcommittee, and I won't vote on anything until this budget subcommittee gives us some additional information. It's great representation from not only faculty and classified professionals in the cabinet, but also students who are represented on that committee, and I really want to hear from them. I also would love to hear from students just in general about this. I will say, as a board member, and because I care about this institution, and I want to give not only our board, but also our budget committee as many options as possible to have tuition increases be as close as possible to the HEPI increase, because I I feel like that will give us the most financial options of our institution, the closer we are to 4%. I know that might not be a popular opinion, but I feel like that the closer we are to the HEPI increase, the better we are as far as options are as an institution. Steve, we're over time by 4 minutes. Do you have a quick statement or question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Maybe it might be a question for Jennifer. It's kind of based on something Zach just said about our deferred maintenance increasing. So this has been a concern of mine as well, but my understanding of this has changed in the last couple of years in that that deferred maintenance grows to some extent, largely because we are not fully funding our deferred maintenance budget year in and year out, but that we also have come to be somewhat dependent on putting these bonds out the way we recently did 3 or 4 years ago, and that we might do that again in a handful of years to chip away at that deferred maintenance. And so, so we have to sort of factor that in to our budgeting. It's kind of a weird thing to do that, well, we know, or we have some confidence that our community will likely help us out with those things 3 or 4 or 5 years out, I think is how we tend to operate. I was just wanting to confirm that with Jennifer, or if she felt that no, the increasing deferred maintenance is a significant problem that we ought to be addressing in our annual budgets.
Jennifer's coming up.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And I am giving a presentation on this at the next work session with a lot more information, but it is true that Lane has been able to maintain a semi-decent, not catastrophic level of deferred maintenance issues because of the bonds that we've passed about every 10 years. But they don't cover the whole thing, or they haven't tended to. So we really need to continue investing through the college general fund as well. And like I said, I'll give a lot more information about that at the next work session.
Okay, I didn't know you were about to present. I'll
Yeah.
look forward to hearing more about it.
Yeah.
A quick follow-up, but even with the bond, the backlog is growing.
I would say with the bond, the backlog is about staying steady. It increases every year because of inflation and then because new things are added to the list every year, but the bond did also take a big chunk off. So it's kind of if you look at now versus 5 years ago, it's about the same maybe because of the bond.
I look forward to seeing next month's
Yeah.
presentation.
Excellent. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate that presentation. Look forward to those next week's next presentation. Next is Lane Forward. Dr. Bulger.
Yes. I want to have Shane Turner, our AVP for HR, do the presentation on Lane Forward.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about Lane Forward. This is a project that Dr. Bolter and I had been talking about for a while, and really excited to see it come to fruition. Thanks for sharing the slides. If you'll just go ahead and go to the next one, please. Tonight, I want to cover sort of an idea of what the program purpose and scope was, kind of the timeline we've been working on incredibly fast. Just give you a brief overview of the proposals and then talk a little bit about what happens next now that we have some finalists delivered to us by the committee. Next slide. So this was funded, as you know, by carving out $263,000 from M&S funds. And the focus was intended to direct those towards our strategic investments. So how could we increase enrollment, retention, or student success? And if we were going to do that, let's try to get some additional bang for our buck. So creating some professional development opportunities for our employees in the areas of leadership and project management and supervision skills. So we wanted to keep it kind of open in terms of the types of proposals we might get. So we allowed for single year or up to 3-year proposals. Next slide, please. So the criteria, we approach this as a very real kind of grant program. So people had to submit proposals up to 10 pages that had a meaningful impact that you could measure on student enrollment, retention, or success. They had to provide an action plan with steps that were measurable and achievable. They have to have a plan for how they would measure those things, and they'd get extra points if the project could be scaled or grown over time. And we're also looking for projects that kind of broke down silos across the organization. So trying to incentivize people to work together across departments or divisions. On the right-hand side, you can see the evaluation team. These are the folks that came together, created the criteria, and screened all of the applications that we received. Missing from this list is Sharon Daniel. I didn't realize that she'd be able to participate, but she also was involved in completing the evaluations that were finished this week. So want to just give a huge shout out and thanks to all of those folks who worked in a super tight timeline, as you'll see in just a little bit, and especially to Amanda to help coordinate it all. Next slide, please. So the timeline, as you can see, it's been a pretty short timeline because we only received information later in the fall that we might have funds to actually initiate this launch. So we launched the program in early November, and Kathy Thomas and Jean Reeder put together a grant writing proposal for folks who maybe had never written a grant before, so that they could get some training on what we'd be looking for in a proposal. We solicited those proposals then in December and January. And then the committee got together and completed their review and recommendation of finalists just this week. So we now are going to take those finalists and make a decision next week as a cabinet. And so we'll have new updates for you on who the selected and funded finalists are. Next slide, please. So what did we get for proposals? This was just amazing to me. We got 22 proposals with participation from or nearly 100 employees across campus. Okay. And it was so exciting to see the different synergies that came together, different groups of people working together on new or novel ideas or new twists on ideas. Just a huge diversity of proposals that you saw in the other document that I included in board docs, those 28 proposals. I was just so impressed and really proud to be able to be a part of making this kind of a program happen. Next slide, please. So I include this quote. You hear me talk frequently about campus climate, and obviously there's a financial payoff for investing in innovation, right? There's statistics to go along with that. But one of the things that I think is important for a project like this is that, we've been cutting for a really, really long time here. And this is a project that looks at how we can increase enrollment growth by giving people hope, by giving people something that they can get behind and feel like we're not just taking away, we're building something. And that's just really, really powerful. So I'm just really, really glad to be able to do this year. Next slide. So the finalists, as I mentioned, those recommendations came to me this week, yesterday from that recommending group. There were 7 finalists recommended for funding, some of them for multi-year, some of them for 1 year. Those recommendations will go to cabinet, and we'll have more information to share with you all. But just really, really glad to be able to do this kind of work here at this time. It feels really promising. And I'm open for any questions you have.
Excellent. Any questions from the board? Zach. And it's going to go Zach and then Denise.
Not a question so much as a comment. Just appreciated reading all of the proposals. Did want to shout out year-round registration. That is something that I've been very supportive of. And if it doesn't get funded this round, I still support it. I hope I hope it happens. I think that letting students register for a full year of classes will increase enrollment and retention and probably pay for this whole grant program. So I really hope that moves forward. Thank you.
Thanks. Excellent. Denise.
So do I understand correctly that the focus, the purpose was to increase enrollment? So that was what proposals were directed at? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, sort of three prongs. So enrollment, retention, and success.
So that was part of the parameters of what a proposal needed to address.
That's correct.
Okay. And okay. And so initially this this project started with $263,000, you said, from M&S funds, is that correct?
That's right.
And we just saw some budget data that is asking for an additional $250,000.
An additional $50,000 for Lane Forward. So to bring the total to about 300,000 for next year.
So budget wise, it's because this was a bit of a conversation at our last meeting to clarify and understand the budget request. The budget request is 50,000 or the budget request is 250,000.
Sure. So the slides that John presented would indicate a request for an additional 50,000 to bring the total cost of the program to 300,000 roughly.
So the other amount of money is coming from where?
It's already in the budget. So it's the $263,000 that was separated from M&S that's just carried forward.
Oh, it's carrying forward. Okay. Also from M&S.
Yeah, it was originally from M&S. Yeah, and redirected to this line. If I'm
Okay.
misspeaking, John, if I'm misspeaking, please jump in, but that's my understanding.
Nope, you're absolutely right.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Lisa?
So how are the funds used? Like you'll allocate an equal amount of the 263 to each of the 7 finalists? They get different amounts, and what is the money utilized for? Does it pay for their time working on these projects? Does it pay for resources for the projects? Does it do both? So how's the money dispersed and how's it utilized?
Sure, those are great questions. So as a part of the proposals, each submitter had to prepare a budget, and so the costs for the different proposals vary wildly depending upon what they're hoping to accomplish and the costs associated with that. And the costs really can cover anything. We actually told them they could cover anything except for travel. So there are submissions for equipment and expenses. There was a social media proposal that had requests for funding for a 360-degree camera and a mirrorless SLR and some equipment that people could check out to do those things. Another project, the art project, the campus art project, obviously spends a lot of money on materials, right? But it also spends money on some release time so that the faculty can work together and do some cross-discipline, curriculum development and teaching. So it can cover wages, it can cover equipment, staff time.
Thank you.
Sure. Steve?
I just want to say, I think this is great. It's a relatively small investment, 250,000 this past year, hopefully going to 300 next year, against whatever it is, $100 million or close to $100 million budget for the year. So it's fairly small, quite honestly. I really like the criteria, right? It's focused on things that the institution really needs to be working on this year, and it engages our faculty and staff. I just think it's great, and I just want to commend Stephanie for her leadership, working with the cabinet and staff, et cetera, to make this happen. I hope that we continue it. It's good all the way around.
Kevin?
Yeah, I want to echo that. Thank you, Shane and President Bolter and staff and cabinet and faculty and staff and students. What's so great about this in my mind is it taps into the collective wisdom of our community here. And that's what we should be doing more of. So thank you.
Excellent. Denise?
So what is the college's commitment to utilizing proposals and to embedding them, or actually, I've been the recipient of one of these kinds of proposals, and it certainly was a great experience for myself and a colleague from anthropology and collaborative and cooperative, but it didn't necessarily mean that what was produced and presented to the Board of Trustees was actually used. And so I'm just wondering how the college, how we can know that this effort and these ideas are going to be manifested, so to say, if you get what I'm asking.
Sure. So I can tell you, I'm super excited to make awarding announcements. And so I want to see this happen. Part of the criteria that we built in and part of the evaluation that'll happen is we'll look and see what worked, right? And we wanted to know, are these the kinds of projects that could scale? Because we want to see, is there an impact on these goals, enrollment or success or retention? That's also the reason that people can come back and get a second level funding. We had requests that far outstripped our resources. And so if we had more resources, we'd probably make more awards. And my hope is that these generate the kind of results that would provide more seed funding and allow us to grow and continue to invest in those programs that are showing results. I hope that answers your question.
Excellent. In regards to a question, in regards to seed funding, so essentially additional grants through the feds or other nonprofits and stuff like that. That's essentially one of the things we're trying to achieve with some of the results of these.
There may have been one that had that as sort of a secondary goal. So we don't limit the other sources of funding that might be made available to continue these projects, and it may be that you can tap into more sources and expand the footprint for sure.
Gotcha. Kind of a follow-up question. What is the additional $50,000 that we're wanting to budget? What would that get us?
That'll probably be easier to tell you after we run this first round and you'll be able to see what the projects are that are selected and see the results. It'll allow us to buy more of the list, honestly. I mean, when you look at the list that we got of 22 proposals and we had finalist recommendations for 7, because that's all the money we've got.
Yeah.
So it allows us to iterate and try more things.
Gotcha. Understood. Just overall, just a quick comment. I was really excited that this presentation was happening, quite frankly, because all I know about this program is that it's Lane and Forward, and I like both of those things. So it's good to have this understanding, because I felt like I haven't really had an understanding of the dynamics of it, what it's about. Is it leadership development? Is it what, so I felt like there was a lot of things that the board is missing as far as information about this. I personally felt there was a deficit of information about this. So I was really excited to see this presentation, and thank you for providing it.
Yeah,
Lisa.
the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. So Shane, it sounds like you're going to be providing us additional information in the future. I mean, whether that's a report or however it comes is fine with me. But I'm wondering, when we learn who the 7 finalists are, if you could also provide information about how that's dispersed across the different employee groups.
In terms of representation among the proposal submittals, sure. Yeah, you bet.
Great. Thank you very much.
Excellent. And let's see, nothing else there. President Bolger, is there anything else you wanted to add on this?
No, not at all. I think Shane did a fantastic job.
Excellent. Seeing nothing else. All right, we'll move forward. Before we leave this area of topics, I do want to absolutely thank the cabinet. We really reduced the amount of time for each of these subject lines, and the presentations that the cabinet provided was still informative and so forth. I know it felt really rushed, so I really wanted to appreciate all the speakers and all the presenters today. We tried something different with, I would say that we always try to keep, these time periods for these agenda items really efficient and brief and so forth. But I do have to say, I really do appreciate the efforts of very quick round of information being presented. So thank you so much for that. Moving on to future closing items here, which is the future meeting dates. One of the things I wanted to bring up under this topic was the board retreat that was canceled due to the ice storm. We came into the board for some input and some advice on this, and we, just because of the time periods that we're dealing with, the budget season that we're going to be going into, we're going to be having a lot of meetings in regards to this. We feel that we should have the retreat during our summer session, which is our traditional summer retreat. But we did want to make sure that we do, Kevin, you mentioned around DEI, and that we should take an emphasis on that. I think that will be really critical, especially in the board retreat. But in these next work sessions, having a equity lens training, which was something, Mike, I know you've wanted to advocate for, especially with the new board. But I would even say, even having another DEI work session topic might be really helpful too, before we go into that retreat session in the summer. So Lisa and I and the president discussed this, and we feel that the best option is to have a board retreat in the summer like we traditionally do, as opposed to rescheduling the retreat that was canceled due to the snowstorm. Oh, and we would bring the ad hoc committee subject lines or topic in a future board meeting as well.
Rather than the retreat?
Rather than the retreat, yeah. Lisa, was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I mean, I think we've identified March and April for each of the two items.
Yep. Excellent. And that is all I got for the future meeting dates. Board comments and questions. Zach?
Just wanted to thank staff for the responses to information requests. I did have a follow-up on two subjects. First, regarding the expanding access for high schoolers to college. Does LCC get money for students that are enrolled in college now? Does that count towards our state funding allocation? Great. If we could get a number of approximately how many state dollars we get per FTE student, that would be very helpful. Very interested in expanding access to those programs. Similarly, given that we have a lot of extra space in our classrooms, we can teach about 8,000 students, but we only have about 6,600. I'm very interested in expanding opportunities for high schoolers to take classes at Lane. Currently, they can take one free class. I'd like to be able to expand that. And so I'm very interested in potentially having a work session on this topic of expanding high school access to college. And guess I can make that request to our chair and vice chair that we try and look at that as a future agenda item. And then to baseball, the city of Eugene today, they voted to forward a ballot measure to voters for a bond measure for a new baseball stadium for the Emeralds. They asked that Lane County provide them with plan to close the remaining funding gap and to provide a plan for operations and maintenance so that the city isn't left holding the bill. It seems like a really interesting opportunity where the Titans could potentially get access to a world-class stadium for less than we would pay for a baseball field for ourselves. And I just hope that we can actually approach the Emeralds and or the county about what it would actually cost to get in at the ground floor of this project and potentially have a better deal than we would be able to do ourselves. Thank you.
Excellent. Denise.
a little bit of connection to Zach's point. Just to clarify, do we have a dual enrollment program that does, in which high school students in fact can take more than just one concurrent class?
Dr. Jordan?
Yes, the College Now program allows high school students to take any number of classes. These are taught by high school faculty primarily in the high school, but they have been kind of approved at the college level. So the students are getting high school credit and college credit simultaneously. And so that's a really robust program we have here. And we can probably present on the numbers of that at a future event. No.
Yes, because we get the FTE on that.
Yes.
Yes, so I know we've heard some numbers in the past on College Now on it. I just wanted to clarify and see if I understood this correctly. I have it in my notes that we will get some specific presentation on the deferred maintenance at the next work session. But our next work session is after what I heard would be a action item budget proposal at our next meeting. Did I get that right?
I don't know. John, are you still on the line?
No.
John, are you still on the line? I think John is gone. My understanding is that at the next meeting, the action item will be on the tuition recommendation only.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies it. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Were you talking about Zach's statement around deferred maintenance and questions around that, or?
No, I know that we're going to get a presentation,
Okay.
a more in-depth presentation is what we're going to get at the next work session.
Okay, got it.
you.
Lisa, did you have your hand up?
I just wanted to mention for the good of the order, the camera that usually allows you to see the entire board sitting there. I think it's been out the entire meeting. Is that who Alex Crane is?
No, that's our laptop. It's been dropping out. I think it's a network issue. We'll fix it.
Yeah, so that was the laptop. There's network issues that was going in and out of that. So yeah, that's so that is a laptop.
So we don't have the other camera available. It was available at the beginning of the meeting, but it dropped out.
Yeah. It's been trying to connect. Unfortunately, it's been going in and out.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yep. Next time they will wire it. And apologies. Very briefly, I just wanted to state that actually just a question. This is in regards to the Gallup survey and so forth. We'll be discussing that in next month. So is the Gallup survey happening right now? Is it live right now? What's the status of that?
It's not live right now. We try to pick a window that doesn't, hit us at midterms or the beginning of term or whatever. Last week, the beginning of last week, Cabinet reviewed some proposed dates, and we're going to run it from the 8th to the 26th of April. And that way, it should kind of miss some of those tougher times and get a better response rate than we got last time.
Perfect. Thank you. And I just want to encourage participation in the Gallup poll. We really want to see that information, that data. I also know we have the affirmative action report next month as well. And I look forward to that report as well. It's going to be a busy presentation meeting for you. I really appreciate you. All right. And any other board comments, questions? All right, we do have an executive session after this, but we'll go ahead and move into adjournment. To go into executive session, everybody's okay. There was a loud noise. So we are adjourned. 10 minutes bio break. Yep.